it was she was actually shown to me by my younger sister. R&B to me was a genre that I felt like was dying and was merging with like hip hop, which all genres evolve and merge over time, and that's to be expected. But this was the first time in a unique way that I felt like, okay, all right, this genre might be okay. It might be still okay into the future. And I liked the directions that she took with her songwriting and how it was so super confessional. Like she's having a conversation with you about exactly what she feels in that moment, no filter. And I really have always respected that as in songwriting.
This week's request comes from Deseree Spinks. I first met Des at Roots Rock Revival. She's part of a community of musicians who would always turn up at Roots Rock. A group that includes folks like Ryan Gregg, Kevin Stryker, Shane DeSena, that drummer guy Craig, whose last name I don't know, a few others whose names I've completely forgotten because I'm a terrible person.
Shame.
Des also has a band called Des and the Swagmatics that you need to check out. In fact, if you're seeing this video the day it's published, you can see them tonight at the Wonder Bar in Asbury Park. I think maybe my second year at Roots Rock, I remember Des leading a group of her friends at the Roadhouse, performing an absolutely delicious version of Smokey Robinson's Cruisin'. First of all, who thinks to pull that one out, right? But now that I've mentioned it, you see the potential, don't you? And over the years at Roots Rock, that little group of musicians just continued to impress us more and more, to the point now that we hired Ryan Gregg for keyboard work in Brother and Sister, and at Roots Rock Revival, we've hired Ryan, Kevin, and Des to be our proxies in all the mini jams that pop up everywhere, with Des in particular being my partner at the Roadhouse. And it's made all the difference in the world. Not only can she sing, but honestly, I've yet to encounter an instrument in that setting that she can't play at a professional level. I've seen her up and playing keyboards, bass, guitar, and drums. Plus, she's got a deep knowledge of theory, an intuitive understanding of communication and dynamics, and a gigantic collection of songs that she's prepared to execute at a moment's notice. And she's a complete joy to perform with. But beyond all that, she's one of the most genuinely good people I've met, and I feel very honored to call myself her friend. She's good people, y'all. And Des recommended the SZA album, SOS. And honestly, I am coming into this week almost completely blank, which says more about me than it does about SZA. I mean, I know I've heard her name a bunch. I even know that she got that name from the RZA, from the Wu-Tang Clan. I know she's won a Grammy and that she's been nominated for a bunch more. I'm just very much out of touch with the scene she's a part of. But Des has described SOS as unapologetically R&B, and that's very much appealing to me. So let's get stuck into SOS, shall we? Never mind, you keep doing your thing. I'll be back in a bit.
She's saying some really beautiful things, but her affectations kind of make it a little difficult to understand all the time. So like put the lyric sheet in front of you and then listen to the songs. Start with the hits and start with the features, and then work your way backwards from there, because the hidden gems are probably my favorite ones. But other than listening to it with lyrics and listening to the hits first and then working your way through the rest of the album, I also recommend checking this out in order. All of her albums actually are really great in the order that she put them out in. It was quite intentional. And the interludes that bleed into the other songs go together. They all are part of the same kind of listening landscape. That being said, there's definitely some fun surprises on there, like an Avril Lavigne, pop punk girl rock song. There's still some fun surprises in there that'll throw you for a loop. It's not all the same thing.
First of all, SOS is a longer album than I was expecting. Double album, 23 songs, an hour and 7 minutes long. The credits list is long too, but mostly names I'm not familiar with, though I do recognize Lizzo, Phoebe Bridgers, Jacob Collier, And most surprising to me, Styx Hooper, the drummer for the Crusaders. Yeah, I bullied Dez and some others into learning Street Life last year so I could play it at Roots Rock. I love that song.
Street life, until you play your life away.
Realistically, 23 is far too many songs to go over one at a time and reasonably expect you guys to still be watching it an hour and a half later. So I'm going to sum up the sections of the album as I hear them this first time around and call out the standout tracks. And interestingly enough, each of the 4 album sides seems to have its own vibe. On side 1, she establishes a persona of someone with a complicated emotional life. Someone who longs to be understood and appreciated, but also very guarded of her own feelings due to previous bad experiences. Pretty standard fare for this style of music, but nonetheless broader and more nuanced than simple love and heartbreak. Musically, there's a good amount of hip-hop influence on side 1, especially on Low, which has a few duet sections with Travis Scott. Though I think my favorite song on side 1 is Kill Bill. It's got a memorable hook in the chorus, and I've always loved the tension created by throwing a dominant 6 chord on the end of a major 2-5-1 to build tension. Yeah, especially when you throw the 3 in the bass for that 6 chord so you can get a little chromatic moment there. Or even more fun is when you add the flat 9 and you get this. I love that. Side 2 starts to veer a bit from the styles and the forms she uses on side 1. For starters, all the songs on side 2 have some kind of intro and some kind of outro, instead of just starting and ending right with the first and last verses. Also, the musicality of her melodies is increased, as are the technical demands of the vocal performances. It almost feels like the arc of side 2 sees her transcending the cycles of expectations and disappointments that she establishes on side 1. She's still emotionally vulnerable here, though, and still has the ability to demand accountability and respect, and to exude her own badassery, like on Smoking on My X-Pac. But many of the songs get dreamier here, especially Gone Girl, which references the Daryl Hall and John Oates tune She's Gone.
Gone girl, you better learn how to face this.
She's gone, I better learn how to face it.
And also the last song on this side, Ghost in the Machine with Phoebe Bridgers. A couple of very clever hidden musical moments in this one.
I was yours for free.
Side 3 has a definite 90s undertone, all through it, from the Avril Lavigne-inspired chorus of F2F, to the Red-era Taylor Swift / Fiona Apple sounding choruses on Nobody Gets Me,
How am I supposed to tell you? I don't want to see you with anyone but me.
to the Radiohead and Beck references in Special.
I give all my special away to a loser.
The anger is up a bit on side 3, but so is the self-doubt. It's funny how those two things always seem to go together, isn't it? Side 4 has one of the catchiest songs in the album, I Hate You. I think I Hate You is tied with Kill Bill for my favorite song on the album. But the theme on side 4 musically seems to be soundscapes of all types, from distorted, crinkly, shiny hyperpop like in Shirt, to the lo-fi guitars of Open Arms,
Open, I'm so devoted.
to the Radiohead style heavy delay and wide spaces used on Good Days. Plus, Old Dirty Bastard gets the last word, which is a word I won't be repeating. At first listen, musically, it feels very much like a collision of about 4 different albums covering a wide range of styles. Individually, the songs on SOS range from groovy to heavy to spacey. Collectively, though, the through line of struggling with self-worth and self-awareness anchor everything to a single but relatable persona. Plus, the lyrics and melodies all identifies these works as being from a single artist. But mostly my thoughts this first time through have to do with the interplay between the function and the history of music that I'm going to have to think about a whole lot more. So I'm going to go think. Think and listen. Listen and think.
it's almost like a passing of the torch and a cosign from a lot of older artists. I read that the last single that came out, I think, was Snooze, and was co-written by Babyface, which I was so shocked by. But I'm like, that makes sense, and it makes sense that a lot of the older R&B artists are really signing on to SZA, and she was a songwriter in the game long before she was an artist. She wrote for Rihanna and Sia and Beyonce before she was signed and had her own albums. And I just love seeing this evolution for her. And it's a Black woman in her 30s that is still making new music that is relevant and that is for everyone, and that is so universal. Whether, like, my sister and I got to go to see SZA maybe a couple of months ago, and looking at the audience, you would never know what kind of concert you were at. There were so many different kinds of people there, and so many different kinds of outfit and stages of dress and ways of expressing themselves, because there's not like what a SZA fan looks like. It's for everyone, and I really, that very much resonates very deeply with me.
Language evolves, irregardless of our attempts to literally lock it in a tower. I like that quote a lot. I forget where I first heard it. I think it was on the Welcome to Night Vale podcast, actually. There is a truth contained in the music on SOS that I think some folks aren't ready to hear. Not the truth that women are allowed to speak frankly about their emotional life and their sexuality. Yeah, I'm hoping all you watching this have come to terms with that by now. No, see, I'm talking about a truth that is likely to be a lot harder for some folks to swallow. Namely, the fact that music is changing does not mean it's getting worse. It just means it's changing. There are 3 things on SOS to illustrate what I mean. First, the Roland TR-808 and TR-909 drum machines and their associated sound palettes are just as much a part of the spectrum of percussion sounds as are timbales, congas, rototoms, or any other acoustic percussion. In fact, there are drummers I've worked with who intentionally tune their kick to sound like an 808. Second, guitar solo logic is an absolutely valid way of composing melodies for your lyrics. Just like a good guitar solo, or any solo for that matter, can introduce a phrase and then play with it, going through variations and permutations, the melody of a verse can do the same. The melody for your vocals doesn't have to be a simple, hooky, repeated line. It can meander. It can have faster and slower passages. It can emphasize specific phrases. It can use each and every one of the tools that 150 years of improvised American music has developed. And finally, and perhaps the hardest for some of you, consider this. Distortion is an effect. Chorus is an effect. Reverb is an effect. And you know what else? Auto-tune is an effect. You don't have to like it, but the fact of the matter is that auto-tune produces a sound that the instrument, in this case the voice, cannot produce on its own. A singer can employ auto-tune for a specific vocal effect, and that is just as musically valid as a keyboardist employing wah for their clavinet. And no, auto-tune is not just a crutch. Don't believe me? Well, you know the name T-Pain, right? He's the artist most known for utilizing auto-tune.
She gave me a wink back.
Now listen to T-Pain sing without it.
10 rows gathered and learned my say. Just like witches said, like masters.
And all 3 of those things are things you need to come to terms with in order to hear what's actually happening on SOS. And here's where my other recent listening is going to come in handy. Namely, Andrew Hickey's astonishingly great A History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs podcast.
A History of Rock Music in 500 Songs by Andrew Hickey.
Andrew Hickey has the ability to gather facts, many I knew, some I didn't, and present them in a way that paints a much clearer picture of the continuity of music from 1939 to today, more so than I'd been able to grasp on my own. And one thing that's come up repeatedly over the course of his episodes is the fact that since the 1940s, what we know today as rhythm and blues has always been at its best when it pushed the envelope. And in that regard, It seems to me that you can put SOS on the same timeline as Good Rockin' Tonight by Roy Brown, Heat Wave by Martha and the Vandellas, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder, and The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Of course, with the proviso that there may indeed be 1,000 new R&B albums over the past few years that are more deserving of such attention. As I said, I'm kind of out of touch with what's going on in this space. There are parts of SOS that I vibe with quite strenuously. And there are parts that are not as emotionally salient for me. But it's always an interesting listen. So my final thoughts, on a scale of 1 to 10, I give SOS by SZA 1 message in a bottle. See you next week.